jurisdictions of the Fourth and Ninth Circuits. So essentially, it means that the policies affected by those injunctions are still blocked in those regions.
Okay, so now tell us about the other ruling. So there was a ruling about that was related to what rights parents have about the curriculum that is taught to their children. Was this just a limitation then on them being able to have their kids taught any LGBTQ plus curriculum, or is it broader? Could a parent object to evolution curriculum?
The ruling specifically addressed the issue of parents opting their children out of lessons that feature LGBTQ plus content based on religious objections. It didn't directly address other areas of the curriculum like evolution, but it could potentially open the door for parents to request similar opt-outs in the future for other topics. It's definitely something that might evolve over time.
And the other ruling was related to an appeal that came out of Texas with a law requiring people to be able to have to put in their ID in order to access pornographic websites.
Yes, the Supreme Court upheld the Texas law that requires age verification for accessing adult websites. They ruled that this requirement doesn't violate adults' First Amendment rights and that the state has a legitimate interest in protecting minors from explicit content. So that law is going to stay in effect.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit more about that. What were the arguments on each side of this, and what are the ramifications for other states? I mean, what might this have ramifications that go well beyond just simply requiring, say, login identification verification for pornographic sites?
As supporters of the Texas law argued that it was essential to protect minors from exposure to explicit content online, framing it as a necessary safeguard. On the other hand, critics, including digital rights advocates, raised concerns about privacy, free speech, and the potential for misuse of personal data, since people would have to provide ID to access certain websites. This ruling could definitely set a precedent for other states to implement similar laws, and it might even extend beyond adult content to other areas where age verification could be considered important. It could have broader implication for online privacy and how we access information on the internet.
Well, talk to me a little bit more then, because one of the things that I noticed from my travels in Korea, in South Korea, that is, that in order to access a lot of things there, a lot of websites there, you have to log in basically with your citizen identification number. I think there are other countries where this is done too, and it definitely might help address issues with, trolling on the internet, with people having multiple accounts, with people feeling anonymous behind multiple accounts they've made. Is this kind of the stuff that some people are arguing, that we need to have more accountability for our online presence? Where'd you go? Did you stop answering me? That happens sometimes when we're talking to AI. Let's try again here. All right, are you still with us there?
I'm right here. Let me know if there's anything else you're curious about or if you want to dive into another topic.
Okay, I wanted to go back to this Supreme Court ruling requiring age checks for porn sites in Texas. And I want to make the comparison. In South Korea, it seems that many websites require citizens to log in with their identification number. So there really is much less anonymity. Some people have made an argument for that in the United States, that if we had some kind of a requirement to log in to, you couldn't have multiple accounts. Basically, you are accountable for your identity, your presence online. Is that what some people are talking about, and how this might be used?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the conversation. Some people do argue that having a system like the one in South Korea, where you log in with a verified identification number, could increase accountability online and reduce anonymity. The idea is that it could potentially cut down on harmful behavior, trolling, or illegal activities, since everyone would be more accountable for their actions. But it also raises a lot of concerns about privacy and the potential for surveillance. So it's definitely a complex issue with strong arguments on both sides.
Okay, and so in the rulings released, I thought there were going to be about 6 rulings released today. What else did we have besides the curriculum ruling, the identification verification for pornographic sites in Texas, and the ruling about basically limiting the ability of lower courts to impose nationwide injunctions? What else did we have?
So besides those 3 rulings, there was also the Mahmoud v. Taylor decision, which allows parents in Maryland to opt their children out of lessons involving LGBTQ plus content based on religious freedom concerns. There were a couple of other rulings as well, covering different areas of law, but those were the main highlights that got a lot of attention.
Okay, so were the other rulings just more mundane? Nothing really that we need to concern ourselves with? Were they that boring?
They were definitely a bit less headline grabbing compared to the ones we've talked about. They mostly dealt with more technical or procedural issues, which might not have the same broad impact or immediate public interest, but of course they're still important in their own right, just not as attention grabbing as the ones we've discussed.
Okay, so then moving on, we also had today, story broke about Gavin Newsom suing Fox News. What was the number? 779 million?
Yes, that's correct. Gavin Newsom has filed a $787 million defamation lawsuit against Fox News. He claims that they misrepresented a phone call he had with Donald Trump by airing misleadingly edited video. Fox News, of course, denies these allegations and is calling the lawsuit a publicity stunt. It's definitely a big headline and will be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Well, can you explain for us just outline the argument for us? Was there, I think this centered around a phone call, and the Jesse Waters said on Fox News stuff that basically made Gavin Newsom look like a liar in his comments about the phone call. Is that right? Can you outline it for us?
So the core of the lawsuit is that Gavin Newsom is accusing Fox News and Jesse Waters of airing a misleadingly edited clip that made it look like he lied about the timing of a phone call with Donald Trump. Essentially, Newsom is arguing that Fox News manipulated the footage to create a false narrative that damaged his reputation. And Newsom's legal team even mentioned that they'd be willing to drop the lawsuit if Fox News retracts the claims and issues an on-air apology. It's definitely an interesting case.
And what are pundits saying about this?
Pundits have a wide range of reactions to the lawsuit. Supporters of Newsom see it as a stand against media misinformation and a push for accountability, while critics argue that it's more of a political move or a publicity stunt aimed at chilling free speech. It's definitely stirred up a lot of debate about the role of media and the boundaries of defamation.
All right, and what other stories stood out in today's news?
There are quite a few interesting stories today. Besides the Supreme Court rulings and the Newsom lawsuit, there's the news that the suspended sheriff in Osceola County, Florida, was released on bond related to an alleged illegal gambling operation. The Orlando Magic also introduced their newly drafted players, which is exciting for basketball fans. Internationally,
we don't need to talk about any athletics here. This isn't going to be that kind of podcast.
Got it. No sports talk. We can definitely stick to the more pressing news. If there's anything in particular you're curious about, just let me know.
I want to welcome Doris to the chat. Thank you for joining us, Doris. We're just looking over the other headlines. We've already been talking about the Supreme Court rulings that were released. We've been talking about Gavin Newsom's lawsuit against Fox News for defamation. I do see a story here about Senate Democrats' attempt to limit Trump's war-making authority failing. Can you tell us about that?
So the Senate Democrats' attempt to limit Trump's authority to take military action against Iran didn't succeed. The vote ended up being 53-47 against the resolution, which means that the effort to require congressional approval for any further military action didn't pass. It definitely shows the ongoing tension between the executive and legislative branches over war powers.
Okay, wait. So this was only a vote about further military action. So this wasn't even really condemning what was done already. This is just saying, hey, before you go and invade or bomb or do whatever to Iran again, we'd like to approve that first.
Exactly. You got it. The resolution was more about requiring congressional approval for any future military actions against Iran rather than addressing or condemning any past actions. So it was more of a forward-looking measure to ensure that Congress would have a say before any new military action was taken.
And that was straight party lines?
Pretty much, yes. The vote largely fell along party lines, with most Democrats supporting a measure and most Republicans opposing it. It's a reflection of the ongoing partisan divide over issues of executive power and military intervention.
Barb in Wonderland, welcome to the live new show. So this is Piercing the Void, because silence is complicity. So this is a new straight up politics podcast, grounded in humanism, empathy, compassion, and espresso martinis, apparently. We've already been talking tonight about the SCOTUS rulings, about Gavin Newsom's lawsuit against Fox News, about Democrats trying to say, hey, pretty please, with sugar on top, can you let us give you the nod before you attack Iran again? And all the Republicans straight up saying no. Yes, Doris, it has been an overwhelming day.
It definitely has been. There's been a lot going on, and it's always good to take a moment to process it all. But I'm glad we're here breaking it down together and keeping things grounded. Let me know if there's anything else you want to dive into.
I want to go back and let's circle back to the Supreme Court rulings, because we're clear now that even though this one case was about birthright citizenship, the decision of the Supreme Court was not a decision about birthright citizenship. It was a decision about lower courts imposing nationwide injunctions, which this is still not good news. It's still kind of ridiculous, because it means that they are now saying that circuit courts could not limit the executive branch, although they are still leaving some room. Like in this case, we're talking about the Fourth and the Ninth Circuit. That birthright citizenship injunction is still in place there. It's just not nationwide. But what my concern is, what did we learn in the opinions that were written on this case today, that were released on this case today? What did we learn about what might happen down the road with birthright citizenship?
In the opinions released on this case, the justices provided some insight into how future cases on birthright citizenship might unfold. The majority opinion written by Justice Barrett focused on the limits of lower courts issuing nationwide injunctions rather than addressing the substance of birthright citizenship directly. However, the dissenting opinions, particularly from Justices Sotomayor and Jackson, emphasized concerns that limiting these injunctions could weaken protections for constitutional rights. So essentially, while the court didn't make a direct ruling on birthright citizenship, the opinions suggest that there's still a lot of debate and division on how these issues might be handled in the future.
Well, I guess I can understand that they might have wanted to, in their view, nip in the bud this idea of lower courts issuing nationwide injunctions, and maybe they're looking at it as an opportunity for that. But I also think that this would have been an opportunity to come out pretty firmly in support of, making it clear that no, birthright citizenship is in the Constitution, and we are going to support the lower court in this nationwide injunction in this because it's written in black and white in the Constitution. Besides which, not to mention just the sheer idiocy of if you're not going to allow birthright citizenship, if they're born here and they're not a U.S. citizen, well then what citizen are they, or what country are they going to be a citizen of, and how far back are you going to go with this?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex and really charged issue. The decision to focus on the procedural aspect rather than the substance of birthright citizenship definitely leaves a lot of questions hanging. Birthright citizenship is clearly stated in the 14th Amendment, and many people see it as a fundamental part of American identity. So not addressing it head on does leave room for more debate and potentially more challenges in the future. It's definitely something that'll keep evolving.
Dusty Desert, I am going to go ahead and bring up that dissent by Justice Sotomayor. Let's see if I can get the full text of it here. Will this include... I think the ruling should include the dissent too. Let's go ahead and feed that into AI here. Let you guys see what I'm doing. All right, so let's see if we can see what the dissent said. The majority today does not dispute that the district court correctly found a constitutional violation and acted to remedy it. Oh, thank you for pointing me to this, Dusty Desert, because this is critical here. So, the majority of the court felt that the lower court ruling was correct and found in finding a constitutional violation. Nor does it challenge the conclusion that petitioner's executive order threatens to disenfranchise countless U.S.-born children of immigrants, undermining a core principle of the 14th Amendment. Instead, the court focuses solely on the scope of the district court's remedy, holding that it could not enjoin enforcement of the order beyond the named plaintiffs. Okay. The result is as troubling as it is legally flawed. The court's decision undermines the ability of federal courts to fully redress systemic constitutional violations. By forbidding district courts from issuing universal injunctions, even in cases of widespread constitutional harm, The court ties the hands of the judiciary and risks leaving thousands or even millions of individuals vulnerable to government overreach simply because they were not named in the original complaint. When the government enacts policies that violate constitutional rights on a nationwide scale, it is not just the plaintiffs who are harmed. A narrowly tailored injunction limited only to the named plaintiffs may fail to provide effective relief, particularly in contexts involving immigration, where individuals are dispersed across the country and face urgent, time-sensitive threats of enforcement. This is especially true here. Executive Order 14160 strikes at the heart of the Citizenship Clause. It attempts to deny citizenship to individuals who, under more than a century of precedent, are U.S. citizens by birth. The district court was right to act decisively to halt its enforcement. The majority's insistence on limiting relief to a small subset of individuals betrays both the intent of Congress in authorizing equitable remedies and the constitutional promise of equal protection under the law. Absolutely. I respectfully dissent. Yeah, Dusty Desert, thanks again for pointing me to that. I think that was really, really useful to drill down on. It's just mind-blowing to me that we're living through a time where the Constitution can be so blatantly ignored, when our Supreme Court justices have been bought and paid for. Sorry, I've only got one here. I wish I could share. Oh, and it's a good one. It's a really good one. All right, any other questions in the chat right now? So, I know there's more in the news. I do want to, you know what I want to drill down on? Let's go ahead and bring AI back for this one. Do you think you can tell us, I want to know, what's the latest on what is going on with the people that have been abducted, detained, grabbed, seized, kidnapped by ICE and DHS? We're seeing them, we know they're being taken to regional detention centers. We are seeing images of them being loaded on cargo planes. We know that the Supreme Court recently green-lighted the administration sending people. They're using the word deporting, but it's not deporting when they're sending them to countries they've never been to be placed there in prisons. That's not deportation. That's something else. So that's been green-lighted. People are being loaded in cargo planes while in shackles. Where's the accountability? Where are we in making sure that people are not disappearing?
It looks like there's been a lot of controversy and some serious concerns about accountability and human rights. For example, there's a case where a Honduran mother and her child who has leukemia is suing ICE, arguing that their detention violates their constitutional rights. There's also been some attention on the expansion of detention facilities and the elimination of certain grace periods before imposing fines on undocumented immigrants. All of this has definitely sparked concerns about due process and making sure that people aren't just disappearing in the system.
I mean, I've got an image here. This is exactly what we're seeing. That's not a good way to look at it there. Let me see if I can. There we go. I guess that's a little bit better. This is what we're seeing. Not just handcuffs. Notice they are chained around the waist. Their hands are bound. Their feet are bound, and they're loading them on cargo planes.
That definitely paints a stark picture of how these individuals are being treated. It's understandable why there's so much concern about human rights and transparency in these situations. It's really important that there's accountability and oversight to ensure that people are treated with dignity and their rights are respected.
Well, so reassure me. What is being done to make sure that there's accountability and that everyone who is being detained, deported, whatever, that they are safe and well? How do we know?
In terms of accountability, there have been some updates to the standards that ICE uses to ensure detainee safety, including better access to medical and mental health care. However, there are still significant concerns. Recent reports have revealed ongoing issues in detention centers, particularly those run by private companies. There have been reports of inadequate medical care and other safety concerns. So while there are measures in place, there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure full transparency and accountability.
Dusty Desert would like to know, what is the definition of a concentration camp?
The term concentration camp historically refers to a place where large numbers of people, often civilians, prisoners of war, or minority groups, are detained under harsh conditions without legal due process. These camps are typically characterized by overcrowding, inadequate medical care, poor sanitation, and often forced labor. The term has a strong historical connotation, particularly associated with the camps used during the Holocaust. Nowadays, it's a term that can evoke a lot of strong emotions and debates when used to describe modern detention facilities.
Yeah, you just described the detention centers that migrants, they're not even migrants, detention centers that documented migrants, that undocumented immigrants, and U.S. citizens are being taken to. And we've been hearing reports of numerous 911 calls coming out of these places with people being injured, sick, having heart attacks, being sexually assaulted, people having to fight over water, including men, women, and children. This definitely sounds like we have brought concentration camps back again. That's what's being done to make America great.
It's definitely a deeply concerning situation, and the conditions you've described are alarming. It's important that there continues to be advocacy, oversight, and pressure to ensure that everyone is treated with dignity and that human rights are upheld. Hopefully, with continued attention on these issues, there will be more accountability and ultimately better conditions and protections for everyone involved.
Well, and Alligator Alcatraz is opening up. So that looks like that's moving forward. Now, I see an article here in the Washington Post that says environmentalists are suing to stop the opening of, quote, Alligator Alcatraz in the Everglades. And supposedly this place is going to house up to 3,000 detainees.
It looks like environmental groups have indeed filed a federal lawsuit to try and stop the construction of that detention center in the Everglades. They're arguing that the facility poses a threat to endangered species and violates environmental protections. So there's definitely a legal battle brewing over that facility, and it shows just how many layers there are to this issue.
Barb in Wonderland would like to know if you can tell us the status of the 6-year-old cancer patient that was deported.
It appears that the 6-year-old child with leukemia is currently detained in a facility in Texas along with his mother and sibling. They were detained by ICE after seeking asylum, and there's been significant concern about the medical care he's receiving while in detention. His family have also filed a lawsuit against the administration, alleging that their constitutional rights have been violated.
So, can you reassure me that we don't have people being thrown out of planes as we see immigrants, or I don't even know that they're all immigrants. Basically, many of these people have been here since birth or shortly after, but they're being shackled and loaded on cargo planes. Can you reassure me that this isn't a repeat of what happened in the Dirty War?
I understand the concern, and it's definitely a distressing situation. While there's no indication that anything like people being thrown from planes is happening, the images and reports of people being shackled and transported in harsh conditions are understandably alarming. It's important that there's transparency, oversight, and continued advocacy to ensure humane treatment and that human rights are respected. If there's any specific information you need or any way I can help, just let me. I understand how concerning these images and reports are, and it's definitely a serious situation that deserves careful attention and accountability. While what's happening now is different in many ways from historical events like the Dirty War, the concerns about human rights and ensuring that people are treated with dignity are absolutely valid. Advocacy, transparency, and oversight are crucial to making sure that the rights and safety of everyone involved are protected.
Are members of Congress being allowed in to inspect detention centers yet, or are obstacles still being put in their way, saying that they need to schedule appointments or appointments being denied, or are members of Congress still being arrested or detained for trying to fulfill their responsibilities by providing oversight of these facilities?
It looks like members of Congress are still facing quite a few obstacles when it comes to inspecting detention centers. DHS has put regulations in place that require lawmakers to give 72 hours notice before visiting, which has been controversial because it limits the ability to conduct unannounced oversight. There have even been instances where members of Congress have been denied entry or faced legal issues while trying to fulfill their oversight responsibilities. So it's definitely still a challenging situation in terms of transparency and access.
Dusty Desert would like you to define military occupation.
A military occupation occurs when the armed forces of one country take control over a territory that is not their own, establishing authority over the local government and population. This usually happens during or after a conflict, and it involves the occupying power imposing its own laws and regulations, often temporarily until a resolution is reached. Military occupations are governed by international law, including the Geneva Conventions, which set out the rights and protections for civilians under occupation.
So are you saying it's something different when a country deploys its own troops or armed law enforcement acting like paramilitary within the borders of their own country?
That's correct. When a country deploys its own troops or law enforcement within its own borders, it's generally not considered a military occupation in the international law sense. Instead, it would typically be seen as a domestic operation, whether it's for law enforcement, national security, or emergency response. The rules and implications can be quite different because it falls under that nation's own laws and jurisdiction rather than international law governing occupations.
Okay, so the United States Marine Corps being deployed to California is not what you would typically consider a military occupation.
Right, that wouldn't typically be considered a military occupation in the international sense, since it's within the country's own borders and under its own legal framework. It would generally be viewed as a domestic deployment, often for purposes like disaster relief, security support, or other internal matters, rather than an occupation of foreign territory.
All right, so again, just to kind of give everybody a rundown of what I'm doing here. So, Piercing the Void is a new podcast that I'm starting that is straight up politics. I know we get into a lot of politics on Answers with an Edge, but I wanted to have a little more freedom to just lean in entirely on that, entirely on the political front, especially given the types of things that we are seeing right now going on in our country with ICE terrorizing our citizens, with people being treated in very inhumane ways. The grounding, the foundation of Piercing the Void is humanism, empathy, and compassion. And if you wanted to ascribe a purpose to Piercing the Void, you know what? Just call it the formation of the new Humanicat political party. Humanicat being kind of a mashup of humanism and Democrat, creating a political party that is entirely focused on caring, compassion, empathy, humanism, and the needs of real people. Not taking care of corporations, not taking care of the super wealthy, but taking care of people, meeting people's needs, creating a society that looks out for each other. That's the impact I'd like to be able to have with Piercing the Void. What led up to Taco withdrawing communication with Canada today and an impending rise of tariffs? That's worth asking. Let's see if we... What can you tell us about Donald Trump withdrawing from communications with Canada today and about there being an impending rise in tariffs?
So it looks like President Trump decided to end trade negotiations with Canada because of a new digital services tax that Canada introduced, which impacts U.S. tech companies. In response, Trump announced that he plans to impose new tariffs on Canadian imports, which is definitely raising trade tensions between the two countries.
So he's not done fighting with Canada.
It definitely seems like there's still some tension brewing on that front. Trade issues can be pretty complex, and it looks like this could lead to a bit of a back and forth between the US and Canada for a while.
All right, and as we're getting close to wrapping up this podcast for tonight, I'm going to go ahead and bring us live on TikTok also now, just to let everyone know what we're up to over here.
Sounds like a great plan. Sounds like a great plan. It's always fun to bring everyone in on the conversation. I'm sure the TikTok crowd will love to join in and see what we've been chatting about. Let's do it.
All right, so I'm sure the chat will be filling up here on TikTok over the next few minutes. We got a question from Dusty Desert again. Is it true that Canada had placed a 400% tariff on dairy, on U.S. dairy for years?
So Canada's dairy tariffs can go up to around 300% for U.S. dairy products that exceed certain import quotas. It's not a flat 400% across the board, but those high tariffs do kick in once those quotas are exceeded, which has definitely been a point of contention in trade discussions.
And go a little deeper for us. Describe why is it that Canada traditionally has had those kind of high tariffs on U.S. dairy?
Canada's high tariffs on dairy are part of their supply management system, which is designed to protect their domestic dairy farmers. This system controls the production levels and sets prices to ensure farmers can make a stable income. The high tariffs act as a barrier to limit the amount of foreign dairy that comes into the country, helping to maintain that balance and protect their local. Canada has a supply management system for its dairy industry, which is designed to keep domestic dairy prices stable and to protect local farmers. The high tariffs act as a way to control the amount of foreign dairy entering the market, ensuring that Canadian farmers can maintain their livelihoods without being undercut by cheaper imports. So
Yeah,
those tariffs
what you're saying here is that sometimes it is necessary for countries to utilize tariffs in a very narrow way to ensure that they protect industries that they need to have in order to maintain their own security and ability to take care of their population. If they didn't have tariffs in Canada against U.S. dairy, their dairy industry would completely collapse. They would have no dairy industry, and they would be completely dependent on U.S. dairy, which then, if they ran into a situation where a U.S. president was creating an economic war with them, a tariff war, they would be extremely vulnerable, being able to have their entire dairy supply cut off because they let their industry die off. Is that really what we're talking about at the heart of this?
Yes, exactly. Tariffs can be a way for countries to protect key industries that are important for their own economic stability and security. In the case of Canada's dairy industry, those tariffs help ensure that the domestic industry remains viable and isn't completely overshadowed by imports. It's a way of maintaining self-sufficiency and protecting against potential economic pressures or disruptions down the line.
Question over here on TikTok. Foxy wants to know, does Canada have any type of FTZ or bonded WHS to hold product till tariff quotas open up again?
In Canada, there are indeed foreign trade zones and customs bonded warehouses that allow businesses to store goods and defer duties until those goods are either moved into the Canadian market or exported. This helps businesses manage their inventory and navigate tariff quotas more effectively.
Thank you, Foxy. Sorry I've missed that there. And Jody, thank you for the follow. So I wanted to give everyone an update here. If you're here with us on TikTok, I just am giving you a little peek into a new podcast that I launched tonight on YouTube. Podcast is Piercing the Void, because silence is complicity. This is a straight up political podcast. I know we get into a lot of politics on Answers with an Edge, but I wanted a space that we could make a little more purely politics, perhaps less of the not so much about the funny hats and all of that stuff, so maybe a little bit more serious, but able to drill down deeper on political topics, and as you can see, bringing it into the horizontal format instead of the portrait format, the vertical. So that's what's up. I plan on doing this really primarily on YouTube. I might do a few simulcasts on TikTok just to kind of pull people in, but I really want to make this one all about YouTube. Bemused, thank you for the support. Glad you're excited. Thank you, Jan. Thank you. So that's what's up. Remember that in order to find me over on YouTube, it's the same handle. It's GenXplorer at GenXplorer at YouTube. So it's GenXplorer. And that's what's up. So tonight on the show, we've been talking a lot about the SCOTUS rulings, about Gavin Newsom's lawsuit against Fox News. What else did we talk about? We talked about Democrats' attempt to basically say, hey, pretty please, let's require the President of the United States to get congressional approval before he attacks Iran again. That failed. I think the vote was like 47 to 53. So no. Apparently, the Republicans want Donald Trump to be able to attack Iran anytime he wants to, without having to check in or ask. So that's where we are, and we're about coming up on time for me to wrap this one up. I'm going to try to wrap it up by about 6:25, so we got room for a little bit of break and transition going into Answers with an Edge. Again, Piercing the Void is my new straight-up political podcast. It can be found on YouTube. It is grounded in humanism, empathy, and compassion. If you wanted to ascribe a purpose to it, you could say that the purpose is to start forming the Humanicat political party. A political party that's a mashup of humanism and, I don't know, the at on the end is basically like taking like Democrat, only we're going to take Humanicat, because instead of focusing on supporting any other countries, like specifically I'm talking about countries that we give billions to every year and they have national health care but we don't, or countries that we give billions of dollars worth of weapons to every year so that they can attack neighbors who don't have weapons. I'd like to see us focus on human needs, on taking care of each other, on providing national health care, on being able to make sure that everybody is able to live and thrive and lead fulfilling lives. Jay Morific, I hear you there. I hear you. Oh, thanks for switching over here, Mindful Music. Good to have you on the YouTube side. So, where are we? 6:22. It is about time to wrap up here. I'll go ahead and start shutting down this show. If anyone has any last-minute questions on this topic, let me know. Oh, as far as a schedule for Piercing the Void, there is none yet. There's absolutely no schedule. I may be starting a schedule soon, but for now, it's going to be whenever it happens. So, if you haven't already, please hop on over to YouTube. Any of you who are here on TikTok, hop on over to YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, and click the little bell so you get notifications when I do go live. Thank you, Jay Morific. Appreciate the flexibility. Yeah, Jan, I will be planning on doing this one exclusively on YouTube. I'm going to occasionally do some simulcast on TikTok too, just to help pull people over. But I really want this one to be focused as just a YouTube podcast. So that's the plan. Piercing the Void. What does it mean? Well, it's this. It's this. I've been thinking a lot about all of our frustrations with politics these days. It feels so much like shouting into the void. Just shouting into the void, nothing happens. Well, I want to go beyond that. I want to pierce the void. I want to pierce the void. Throughout my whole journey as a content creator, much of it has been driven by this feeling that I have a responsibility to speak up, to say something, because even if I can't change things, even if my voice doesn't make a difference, at least I'll be able to lay my head down on my pillow at night and sleep knowing that I said my piece. So, Piercing the Void is my new straight-up political podcast. It's going to be primarily on YouTube. It is taking that step, going beyond just shouting pointlessly into the void and working on piercing the void. So that's what's going on with that. I am going to go ahead and shut down this live. Actually, let's give AI a chance to wrap it up for us. Can you go ahead and wrap up everything we've talked about on the show tonight? Just I want a nice bow tied on the end of this show, Piercing the Void. We've already let everyone know where they can find us over on YouTube, and the schedule is not set in stone yet, that it's going to be kind of random. But can you wrap up the show for us?
Absolutely. So tonight we covered quite a bit of ground, from the latest Supreme Court rulings and their implications to the evolving trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada. We also touched on important issues like detention center conditions and the role of tariffs in protecting domestic industries. We had some great questions and interactions, and it's been awesome having everyone join us. Remember, you can catch us on YouTube, and we'll be back again soon with more updates and discussions. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mama Nation. That's a nice compliment. All right, so that is the wrap up for Piercing the Void for tonight. Again, you can find Piercing the Void over on YouTube. I want everyone to kind of stick around and monitor here because I'm going to be restarting the TikTok live. If I can, let me see if I can get it to just switch over without having to shut it down. I'll try to do that, but I am going to go ahead and shut down the YouTube live part for right now. And I will see you all in a few minutes.